I do think this is an important effort statewide to engage folks to be more involved civically, and you can make light of that, but the reality is there are people engaged on issues all across the state. It's one of the things that I get to see as governor who are making a difference. And sometimes the issue can be, if you're in Memphis, you're only thinking about Memphis issues, or Chattanooga or Knoxville or Nashville or wherever you are. I think this is a chance to involve people who are already engaged and broaden the scope and their exposure to what they're doing. So I'm excited about the kickoff of this.
Do you think Commissioner O'Day made the right decision by resigning yesterday?
That didn't take long.
I'm just jumping into it. Let's be honest.
I think Kate said what she thought. Said she really had become a distraction, and I think we've all been in situations where you realize there is so much heat around this that it's hard to do your job personally, and it's hard for the people who work for you to do their job. And I think she literally thought this is the best way to continue to try to serve kids the best way we can is to make that decision.
Did you ask her to resign?
No, and again, I think it comes down to Kate thinking right now, can the department function at full effort? And I think she felt like it couldn't, and I can understand that.
There's been criticism for a long time. Why'd you stand by her so long?
Well, I mean, again, I think Kate, you got to remember that everybody's talking about, okay, well, there's issues around the data system. Kate was the first person to identify that. She's the first person that said, hey, with TFAX, we have some major issues here. Kate made some real progress with the department. The fact that there's criticism of somebody, that comes with the territory, and I think it's always my job to figure out what's the right thing for the state of Tennessee.
Why was Commissioner Henry the right person? Why was Commissioner Henry the right person in the interim, and what are you looking for in the person who replaces her?
I think two or three things. I think it was important. We had to have somebody who was. This is a train that's running, okay, and you can't be without an engineer or whatever analogy you want to make. And Commissioner Henry has been around. He understands state government. He understands dealing with the vulnerable population that is DCS. He understands how the provider community works as well, which, DCS, directly, we don't take care of all that many children, but we have providers and partners that we work with, and so he understands those relationships as well. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just wondered if you think she did anything wrong.
That's all of us do things. Heck, I've done things wrong as governor today. I mean, I don't know that that's a fair question of any of us.
What do you think of this $55,000 bill for the records? Did you sign off on it?
Well, the first time I saw the number was when it was in the newspaper. Remember how that came about. The judge came and said, the Tennessee and other organizations were saying, we want everything. We want everything. And we're saying everything would fill up, a warehouse, and it's all over the state. So the judge said, no, what they're asking for is not realistic. Give them these 4 summaries, and then go back and look at the other 200 cases and say, what would it cost to gather that information together? And so we gathered that, and it will take 1,100 hours to do that, and that's what the bill is.
$500 for whiteout and 14,000 miles of driving?
$500. Well, we can't ship those records. They're personal records. I'll be glad to pay the $500 if Ganette's struggling.
Well, can't they be put in the trunk and just while someone's making a trip to the headquarters?
Part of the issue, remember, has been we have never compiled all that information in the history of the state. And you can make a fair question. Well, why haven't you? But the reality is we haven't, and it is spread out everywhere. And so, again, and then part of the issue that we've had to date with the information has been because TFAX couldn't give us correct data, we were doing all this by hand. And I think not having a real systematic way to do it lends to errors, and we want to make certain that doesn't happen.
But there have to be more efficient ways to transport records than having people make special dedicated trips just to drive them back and forth.
I don't know that I guess you could try to coordinate that, and we could cut off some of that, but most of the man hours are not. Again, that's the hours are in having people go through the records.
So this isn't a roadblock to try to keep people from actually getting these records?
Not at all. We did what the judge asked us to do. The judge said, tell them what it would cost. We did exactly what the judge said.
Given the questions that have been raised about operations and what's happened with these kids, would it not be in the state's interest and your administration's interest to get the information out, as quickly as possible to maybe reassure the public
we're working hard to gather that. But again, it involves a lot of. That's a lot of work. Mm-hmm. It's just not that's the issue. Is this information really is spread around? you can say, well, why haven't you ever consolidated? But the state never has. But we're going to work to do that.
Is that what you're suggesting, though, that that's part of the problems of the agencies, that there is no centralized record keeping, that nobody really has a way of knowing because these records aren't anywhere to be
Again,
had?
I think that's part of the issue. I mean, hopefully that's what TFAX will address for us. Then the physical location won't matter as much. If TFAX works like it should, then where that box of information is sitting won't be quite so critical.
Are you satisfied with what you know now, Commissioner O'Day, and can you envision lawmakers needing to call her back to testify?
Well, obviously, they have that right. Again, Kate, I think, worked incredibly hard. This isn't a question of her having, not trying to do anything but her very best for the children of Tennessee.
She arguably knows more than you.
Changing the subject, the Senate appears to be on a fast track on the guns and arms bill. That bill that passed the Senate committee yesterday has no exemptions in it for college campuses,
Right.
K through 12 schools.
Right.
What's going to happen with that?
Yeah.
Do you support it?
Well, I don't know. So actually, we asked to sit down to understand the bill better yesterday because we'd just seen it at the end of last week, and I've always been up front saying I have certain concerns about educational institutions. I think we have to. My job is, and everybody that votes' job is to distinguish between the perspective, your perspective on that, or your and then the reality. And that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're in the middle of doing. I mean, I learned. I didn't know that right now on campuses, if you're a non-student adult, you can, even without a permit, you can carry whatever you want, or you can have whatever you want in your car right now. I didn't. I mean, so I'm learning a lot about what the current law is, and then what this would do to change it to compare what the reality is with maybe what your perspective might be.
Back to Commissioner Davis.
Let me go ahead. You go ahead and I'll come back.
Okay, thank you. Governor, yesterday in a statement, your office seemed to indicate that it had no problem with 225 state workers with the Vocational Rehabilitation Department taking a 5-day trip, $130,000 on the taxpayer dime for a conference to Gatlinburg. Is this an accepted practice in state government to have these type of out-of-town conferences when other state agencies are utilizing video conferencing for training?
Yeah, and as I understand it, that's these are professional development's important. These are folks who hadn't had any training in 10 years. There was a new vocational rehab program that was that we were responsible for implementing, and so they went out and did the work to say where would be the cheapest place to pull that off, because we have to train all these folks who, like I said, hadn't had training in 10 years, and there's a new program.
Why not use a state building or video conferencing webinar like many organizations
you
do
could.
now?
I think all of us would say at some point in time, training, being there live and in person makes a difference. I don't know enough specifically to say if a webinar would have been an acceptable substitute or not. But again, I think most of us would say there is a difference between just something you do in a webinar and then real person-to-person contact when you talk about professional development, particularly when we hadn't done that in 10 years.
Commissioner O'Day knows more about all the DCS things than anybody. Shouldn't she be the one testifying today?
Well, I mean, she could. She's no longer the commissioner.
But I mean, shouldn't she have waited till after this to resign?
I don't think her decision. I'll be honest with you. The hearing today was actually Commissioner O'Day's idea. She was the one that said, "I would like to come to testify." Okay, so the idea that somehow this was connected to her timing, I don't think has any basis in truth at all.
What do you think drove the timing then?
I think it was just her deciding, at some point in time, I've become a distraction. I think her letter speaks very well for itself.
So what do you look for?
I'll come back.
This gun thing, did you ask the Senate Judiciary Committee to do something to that bill, amend it somehow?
Well, I just asked, the meeting yesterday was, tell me what we do now and tell me how this would change things. And I've said all along that the education institutions are a concern of mine, and so I'm trying to understand what's the reality now and how this would change.
Lawmakers want a broad search for the next DCS commissioner. I mean, is this something you're going to look at very, very closely? What are you looking for?
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's my responsibility, to find the very best person. So we will look everywhere we can. I mean, like I said, this is all of 2 days old, so we have not started a search yet. It's one of the reasons I asked Jim to come there, because I knew he could step in and be effective immediately, because I don't know how long it will take to find the right person.
If you could pinpoint one particular goal for the Leadership Tennessee program to accomplish during its first year, what would it be?
I think this to pull people who are from different parts of the state, engaged in different issues with very different perspectives, and bring them together to maybe have a little bit better of a statewide perspective. I know that's been the advantage I've had being governor, is I get to see things. Like I said, vouchers look really different in Memphis than they do even in Knoxville. So somebody, go ahead, Andy.
Go ahead.
If there's no exemption on guns in parking lots for schools, would you veto it?
Yeah, I don't know that. It's too early to say. I don't know exactly what the bill will look like. And again, like I said, we're trying to figure out, or I'm still learning in terms of what the reality is now.
Do you hope to see it change somewhat in the House, or?
I don't know. I mean, we haven't had those conversations. I think at this point in time, like I said, the legislation that came out last week was, like I said, we saw at the end of the week, and we're trying to measure its impact.
Are you concerned that this bill might cost jobs in this state?
Well, I'm always concerned about that. Period. Okay, anything or whether what we're doing is helping or hurting on that. So we're having those conversations again. And again, I think you have an issue there of I kept saying perspective and reality. It should be of perception. What does this do versus what people might think it does?
Guys, we gotta go.